Hi everybody, it's Ron Ward with yet another episode of Mostly Old Parts. Hey, today we're going to go over the stuff that you just have to have if you're going to have an old Mopar and try and keep it on the road. First and foremost, and I know it sounds funny, but if you're dealing with an old Mopar, you're dealing with rust. Get yourself a tetanus shot. I'm serious about this, okay? It sounds funny, but get one because you're going to be dealing with sharp edges and rust and crap and stuff like that, and getting one now is a whole lot better than having a case of lockjaw later. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's go over what you need first and foremost if you're going to have an old Mopar. Well, Mopars, especially A bodies and B bodies, are notorious for having front suspension issues. The lower control arm bushings are a pain in the ass. The upper control arm bushings are not so bad as long as the bolts don't get locked up in the control arm, which is right here and right here. If you can get the eccentric bolts out, you're golden, okay? The lower control arm bushings are, oh gosh, it's going to be hard to see without the light. They're up in there somewhere, and it requires pretty much dismantling the whole front end to get those things out, and it's no easy task. So my cool tool for you today is this little guy. Okay, this is a Mopar upper ball joint socket. If you're going to rebuild a Mopar front suspension, you have to have one because there is the upper ball joint, and they are known for going bad. In fact, before I went on my trip down to Uncle Tony's garage and said hi to him and shot a video and had some great fun with those guys, I had to replace both upper ball joints. The way to do that is pretty simple, but you got to have one of these. This is a ball joint socket. Now you can get these off of the tool trucks for an extremely high price from Snap-on and Matco and Mac and places like that. This particular one is a 1/2 inch drive. They also make them in 3/4 inch drive, and sometimes it's necessary to have that 3/4 inch drive to get these bad boys out. So the first thing you do to get one of these out, you got to take that grease fitting out, and then you've got to take this nut right here off, okay? Take it all the way off and then thread it back on about 4 full turns, okay? That's just to take up the slop for when this thing kicks loose when you separate the ball joint from the steering knuckle, okay? This is the steering knuckle. I apologize for all the grease and stuff on it. It's a 50-some-odd-year-old car, and it's going to have a little grease on it. Anyway, so you back that bad boy off. Then you take a floor jack. I got my trusty old red floor jack here, and you have to take a little pressure off the suspension. You lift this up until you see the suspension come up about 2 inches, okay? We are supported on jack stands. You can see the jack stand right there. But you got to relieve the pressure on the suspension to take out this upper ball joint. I've turned the wheels all the way to the left. We're on the driver's side of the car. That allows me access back here to get that nut off on the end of the ball joint. Get some light on the subject so you can see that just a little bit better. There's that nut. You take the cotter pin out, you back that guy, take it all the way off so you clear the threads. Sometimes these ball joints get so bad that they will actually spin. You can spin the nut and the shaft of the ball joint if you don't clear those threads out first, okay? Take my word for it. Okay, so once you get the pressure off of the suspension by putting a floor jack underneath the control arm and lifting up on it, okay? Then you take that nut off, you can come out here, and with a great big frickin' hammer, I mean the biggest, meanest, nastiest hammer you got, pound on this area right here, okay? That will separate the ball joint from the spindle. You're going to have a gap between the nut here and the spindle here, and when you separate that, okay, you're going to see a noticeable gap right here when it pops loose, okay? At that point, you take your ball joint socket, insert it on the ball joint, and you can use either a breaker bar with a huge cheater on it. I use a jack handle. Or if you have a shag nasty 1/2-inch impact, you can pop it out of there. One of those big electric earthquake impacts. Or in my case, I use a 3/4-inch drive air impact with an adapter. These things are threaded just like a simple bolt. Left hand counterclockwise will loosen it and clockwise will tighten it, okay? You screw that bad boy out. You clean it up thoroughly inside, okay? And put a little bit of grease on the threads. You put the new one in, drive it in with the impact or with your breaker bar. And then when you get that thing all the way down, it's got to be seated all the way down. See how it is there against the control arm? It's got to be seated all the way against the control arm. At that point, you can put your nut back on and torque it to specs and put everything all back together. Okay? You got to have it on jack stands. You got to take the weight of the car off the lower control arm. I have to pry up on that with a floor jack right underneath the control arm. Now, you want to leave enough room that you can move the wheel like so you have ample room to get in there and do what you need to do. Done right, you can do 2 of these ball joints in about an hour. That's what it took me. Put it back together, but you got to have one of these sockets to get it done. Anyway, I will discuss more tools that you have to have if you're working on an old Mopar in mostly old parts. I forgot to mention in my video, so I'm going to add it here towards the end. The ball joint socket that I got here, I ordered it online. It was only about $29 shipped. That's not a bad price at all, but through Snap-on or Mac or somebody like that, it's a $100 socket all day long. So if you know you got a front end rebuild coming up, order one of these off the online providers. I found this guy at Hotchkiss, you know, the guys that build all the hot rod and Restomod type pro touring suspension kits for these old cars. Well, they actually had the hot deal on this socket. It was as cheap as I could find. It's a really nice quality unit, and it was $29 shipped. Okay, guys and gals, this is a Moog ball joint with less than 20,000 miles on it. This is an upper ball joint out of a B-body. It was in my Roadrunner. I showed you just a minute ago how to replace them. This one's only got 20,000 miles on it, and it's toast. In fact, both of the upper ball joints were toast. So I talked with my local alignment guy, and he told me that he's had a whole lot better luck going with the Napa brand ball joints. The Napa brand ball joints are made here in the United States by the Dana Corporation, same people that make the Dana 60 rear ends and so forth. They're built to last. They're a much higher quality unit than the Moog. Now, Moog back in the day used to be the shiznit, okay, as far as ball joints are concerned and tie rod ends and all of that. Well, nowadays they're being made offshore. They're made out of Chinesium, and they just don't last like they used to. So you're going to get about 20,000 miles out of those. Also, the boot that goes on here, these are destroyed and gone, but the boot that goes here on the Moogs, for whatever reason, they dry rot terribly. And they're a bitch to put on in the first place because you have to drive them up over this and they don't want to fit. So a lot of times you'll tear them and that'll introduce dirt and crap and stuff like that. The Napa ball joints did not have that problem. The boot went right on, it slopped right up in there, and it fit perfectly the first time. It's also made out of a much better material than the Chinesium that Moog uses for their stuff. So I'm not one to really pimp out a part, and I'm not doing this for money from Napa. I'm just telling you, the Napa ball joints are much higher quality, and the Moog stuff in the last few years has really, really, really gone downhill in their quality. So if you have the opportunity, there was only about $2 difference between the Moog ball joint and the Napa ball joint that's made by Dana Corporation. I spent the extra couple of bucks, put them in, and I know that I've got a quality unit in there. Anyway, for Mostly Old Parts, this is Ron Ward, and I will see you tomorrow.